celebrating 48 years on the air. Award-winning Farmweek is a production of Mississippi State University Extension.
Today on Farm Week, the beginning of Season 2 of our Ag Series On the Farm. Meet Sam McLemore. In Southern gardening, hydrangea not a stranger. In fact, they're one of Eddie's favorites. In the markets, farmers planting more corn and cotton than expected. Do they know something we don't? Then the conclusion of On the Farm Part 1, Sam McLemore keeping his chin up. Farm Week starts right now.
Hello everybody, I'm Zach Ashmore.
And I'm Mike Russell. Welcome to the first show of our 48th year. Good to have you with us here on Farm Week. As promised, we begin a new season of our Farm Stress series On the Farm. This week in Part 1, the story of Sam McLemore in Starkville, a community-supported ag farmer. He had big dreams, especially after a prosperous decade of success serving his customers.
I'm Sam McLemore. I'm from Port Gibson, Mississippi. In 2009, right after I graduated, I actually hiked the Appalachian Trail and read about spin farming, small plot intensive farming, where you could approach landowners, even if it's backyards, and set up these small vegetable plots and be able to make enough money to make a living gardening essentially in people's backyards. On that same hike, I met another lady that I hiked with for a few days who had a lot of food sensitivities. And she was part of a CSA, which is a community supported agriculture program, one of the original CSAs in the country. She kind of encouraged me to look more into it and to grow naturally. And I started Bountiful Harvest in 2011.
CSA is a model focused on direct-to-consumer marketing. It's a subscription type of model where customers that we will call CSA members or CSA shareholders pay a fixed fee for a share of a farmer's harvest ahead of the season.
We started in our backyard with 10 families that bought into our summer CSA in 2011, but their investment was repaid in produce instead of dollars. So from the start, we actually didn't take on any debt other than that to our customers. The demand just increased exponentially in 2020. You know, as things shut down, people were looking to secure their food, and so we sold out our CSA season immediately and had people like on a waiting list that spring. There was also really good weather in 2020 and the beginning of 2021, and so our strawberry crops both did great those 2 years and had exceeded our like past averages. And we had this opportunity to purchase this new cultivating tractor, which is kind of like a specialty piece of equipment for small vegetable operations. It's the first bank loan that we've taken out as a farm. At that point, we were dreaming big and planning to go bigger, to potentially even open up more ground than we have now. However, with the combination of warm weather last November and December and then extremely heavy rains in February and March this year, our strawberries did terrible, and we only harvested 150 pounds this year, which we should have been somewhere around 5,000 pounds. Our plan with the harvest of, our strawberry harvest was to be paying off debt that we had incurred to plant spring crops and buy stuff that we needed, like pints and containers and bags and different things that we need to run the farm through the year. Each week as the harvest was less and less, it was like, that's just not gonna be there. And the bills kind of started backing up at that point.
CSA is a good marketing model. It may be profitable for farmers. However, it is difficult. When you're operating a CSA, you need to make sure that you have a crop rotation and crop succession to be able to meet the needs of the shares every week. You need to have 5 to 10 different products that you know that you are going to be able to harvest each week, right? So you need to understand production, you need to understand crop rotations, you need to understand planting seasons, harvesting days, frost days, what crops produce better in what plot in your land, what is the best rotation that you can have.
But as we all know, that kind of crop certainty just isn't always possible. We will have the conclusion of part 1 coming up a little later in the show. Before we move on, a preview of On the Farm Part 2. Next week, we meet the Pentecost brothers, catfish farmers in the Mississippi Delta. Here's MSU ag economist Josh Maples to give us a quick glimpse of that story in our next show.
I'd characterize their story as just extremely interesting. I mean, they were row cropping back in the early 80s, and then they kind of got into the catfish industry early on. This was back when the industry was really forming and becoming what it is today in Mississippi. And so they shifted. They shifted from row crops to catfish, and then ultimately they shifted all of their time and effort, or at least most of it, to the catfish industry. So these are brothers, their family has probably as much or more catfish industry knowledge and has really been through all the tough times and the good times of the catfish industry. And I think a lot of that's really reflected in this episode. You'll learn that there's a whole lot more to producing catfish than you probably ever thought about. You'll learn about some of the just really stressful parts of this business that catfish producers carry stress throughout the year that we probably didn't think that they did. So yes, I'd absolutely recommend that you watch it because it's a really fascinating story about these brothers and about the industry as a whole.
That's part 2, season 2 of On the Farm with Delta catfish farmers Ed and Ben Pentecost, coming up on next week's show.
On the lighter side, time for a little name game. Hydrangea is a popular plant that does well in landscapes without a ton of sun. Big leaf, lace cap, and little lime are just some of the names you're likely to hear. Here's Eddie.
Hydrangeas are some of my favorite plants to use in areas of the landscape with part shade and shade. Today, Southern Gardening is on the Mississippi Gulf Coast admiring some beautiful hydrangeas. Let's take a look at some of these beauties. Big leaf hydrangea is one of the most popular and widely grown species, known for its ability to change color according to soil pH and aluminum availability. In soils with a low pH, flower color is blue or purple. In less acidic soils, or those with a pH above 6, flower color is pink. One of my favorites, lace cap hydrangeas, are big leaf hydrangeas that have flat, round flower heads. The centers are fertile flowers, and they are surrounded by outer rings of sterile flowers. The structure of these flowers is similar to a fancy lace cap or pinwheel. Little lime hydrangea, a panicle hydrangea, is a popular dwarf variety of the limelight hydrangea. It is known for its compact size, making it ideal for smaller gardens, borders, and containers. Little lime typically grows to about 3 to 5 feet in height and width, making it more manageable than its larger counterparts. It prefers full sun to partial shade. Oakleaf hydrangea is the native species commonly found in Mississippi. The plant produces large, cone-shaped clusters of flowers, typically starting out white and gradually turning pink as they age. The flowers bloom from late spring to early summer. The leaves are deeply lobed, resembling oak leaves, which is where the plant gets its name. In summer, the leaves are a rich green, turning to shades of red, orange, and purple in the fall. Consider adding some of these beautiful hydrangeas to your landscape. I'm Eddie Smith, and I will see you next time on Southern Gardening.
We'll take a break right here, but don't go away. Coming up, we conclude part 1 of this week's episode of On the Farm. It's a situation so typical for small farmers. Prosperity brought to a halt by one bad crop. A setback so severe that hit his finances so hard that Sam McLemore considered closing his farm altogether. Even technology couldn't deliver him from this devastating challenge. The plight of the small-scale farmer, that's coming up on Farm Week. Don't go away.
Here's this week's Farm Week calendar. Just one item this week, the EPA has mandated new training requirements for private pesticide applicators. The requirements, for those who handle restricted use pesticides on farmland and need to renew or obtain certification, start July 1st. The training is on video, covering many new procedures. At the end, there's a 55-question exam and you must score at least 70%. Cost of the training is $60 per person with 2 ways to take the test, online or in person at a local extension office. For computer questions about the training and exam, call the Center for Technology Outreach at 662-325-3226. Or for questions more related to who's qualified or who needs to take the training, call 662-325-5829. Remember, the new private pesticide applicator training requirements begin July 1st. And that's this week's Farm Week calendar.
I believe in people and their hopes, their aspirations, and their faith. I believe in intellectual freedom to search for and present the truth without bias and with courteous tolerance toward the views of others. I believe that education is a lifelong process and the greatest university is the home. That my success as a teacher is proportional to those qualities of mind and spirit that give me welcome entrance to the homes of the families I serve. Because I believe these things, I am an extension professional.
Time for the markets, a big USDA report making waves.
Indeed, Mike. The June acreage report dropped, and it looks like it's making some big waves in the markets. And we'll get into that, but first, the numbers. What were last week's biggest gains and losses? And then, a deeper dive into the June acreage report. What did it tell us, and what are the implications? MSU row crop economist Will Maples gives us the details. So, markets closed last Friday, trending down, slightly down. Row crops mostly affected, while livestock up. Let's take a look. This week's biggest gain, sugar, up a little over a penny. That's a 6% increase from the previous week. The week's biggest loss, corn, down nearly 14 cents. That's more than a 3% decrease from the previous week. So, June acreage report released last week. In short, corn and cotton acres higher than expected, while soybean about where we thought. MSU row crop economist Will Maples spoke with me about this to talk about the market implications. The USDA recently released its June acreage report, so tell me, what are the biggest takeaways from that report?
Yes, so it was a kind of few surprises out of this report. So historically, this is always a really important report for the market because this is our first real survey of what's been planted this year. So this year's main surprise we saw was increase in corn acres from the March prospective planting by nearly 1.5 million acres. So this is a very bearish number for the market, a lot more acres than were expected on corn, because that puts it at nearly 91.5 million acres of corn planted this year in the U.S. So corn's going to struggle going forward with that much acreage on top.
So yeah, we have a lot of corn in storage right now. So knowing that we have all of these extra acres on top of the corn that's in storage, I could see how that would make the markets more bearish.
Most definitely, especially too with what the weather outlook is. I mean, we're getting timely rains throughout the Midwest right now. There was some severe flooding in Iowa, took some bushels out, but overall rain makes grain, and the outlook is going forward that the crop's looking pretty good at this point of the time of the year.
Fair enough. So how does it look on soybeans? What did the acreage report have to tell us on that?
So soybeans somewhat surprised the market as well because they reduced soybean acres from their March estimate by about 300,000 acres. So most of the industry trader experts thought that we would see an increase in soybeans because kind of the general idea was it was a little wet planting corn this year, so maybe some reduced corn acres, and then, you know, the rest would go into soybeans. We didn't see that with that report, so overall kind of bullish on soybeans, but really just looking to stay pretty flat going forward in the market.
Yeah, fair enough. Up here in the northern part of the state, when I'm driving around, I'm seeing a lot more cornfields than soybean fields, and I know that's just this part of the state, but I'm sure they've got a lot more, excuse me, in the Delta.
Yes, so they did increase corn plantings in Mississippi from what they said in March. But still, we're still looking at over 2 million acres of soybeans planted across the state.
So last but certainly not least, cotton. What did cotton have to show us?
So cotton was kind of also a surprise in this report, as we saw them add nearly 1 million acres of cotton across the country. In Mississippi specifically, they increased our estimate to 520,000 acres. That's up 20,000 from where we were in March. And this was really unexpected to the market. I didn't expect them to find that many acres of cotton going forward. Cotton's been struggling lately already with demand. This increase in acres on top of it is going to be some pretty heavy downward pressure on prices going forward.
Yeah, I do find that interesting too, because yeah, the demand for cotton has been down recently. So I'm wondering, maybe the growers know something we don't.
Yeah, so kind of the idea was so when the March report came out right before planting, we've seen prices slide since then. So we thought maybe some of these lower prices would incentivize less cotton acres, which we've seen the opposite. 11.5 million acres of cotton nationally is going to be a hard number for the market to swallow.
And that's it for a deeper look into the markets. Looks like row crops continuing to do well so far this year, which means prices could also continue to fall. Mike?
Thanks, Zach. Back to our series on the farm. In the conclusion of Part 1, CSA farmer Sam McLemore is a man with a plan and some big dreams, but nature wasn't completely cooperative. The question becomes, do you hold on after all this time or try something else?
We plant over 100 different varieties out here, and there's probably 40 different crops that we're doing throughout the year. So that diversity, it helps us to spread the risk, but it can also hurt us in that we're not able to focus on a crop and get it really good.
This is arugula, Astro arugula. I'm getting like 4 or 5 seeds per hole, which will put it nice and dense. If I had all the tools for the tractor, I'd have a seeder that mounted on the tractor and be able to seed 3 lines at once. But instead, I'm gonna have to try to walk these lines that I just laid out with the basket weeder up front. And try to get my cedar to stay in the lines that it left.
That's an issue that small-scale producers face, which is limited access to capital, limited access to equipment. And while technology is great, right, it has allowed us to produce more efficiently. Generally, corporate farms are able to invest in that equipment, and they're able to benefit from the gains in technology, gains from the scale of production, having lower cost, producing more at lower cost, increasing supply, which generally puts down pressure on prices. Small farmers do not benefit from that. So are consumers willing to pay a premium for local fresh products and to support the local environment? And there are a target market that is willing to pay a premium, but you have to understand that not everybody is willing to pay a premium. Survival rates for small farmers is only 44%. So more than half of the operations that open close.
We've got big plans and dreams of what this place could be if we were to invest more into it. But at this point, it's got to stretch so thin on finances. It's like we can't do anything new or improve because we've got to catch up. This year especially has been the toughest year yet. You know, when you have less crops in the ground, then you have less income coming. You know, we're selling everything basically by the ounce or by the pound. And, you know, we've got this labor going into it, but don't always get the pounds coming out of it. So it's tricky to figure all of that and to have enough to keep coming in, yeah. Luckily, my wife has a good job, and we've been able to live within her means, you know, and be able to. She's been able to take care of a lot of the things that the farm is not meeting the needs of. And there are definitely conversations of, do we just close the farm altogether? Do we cut it back to, you know, just a smaller size that's more manageable and sell the tractor so we don't have that loan, and sell other equipment and just reduce, you know, pare everything way down? Like, do I just go work for, you know, someone else and get a salary or, you know, just get an hourly job? Do I start delivering pizzas? You know, what is it that I'm going to do? Am I going to be a door dasher? Or we talked about all sorts of options. Because the farm will take all that you'll give it, you know, and there's always more to do on a farm than you could ever do in a day or a year. No matter if you had all the help, you know, there's always something else that you could be improving.
If you had to, if it comes to you closing the farm, like how would that feel?
Yeah. I mean, there'd be a huge disappointment in that I'm not able to continue doing, you know, this job that I love to do. A huge disappointment, I feel like, in letting our customers down and our community that we see every Saturday morning at the farmers market. To have to end those relationships from that point it'd be tough, and it'd be tough to have to take all this down and sell it. You know, that it would definitely be, it'd be a big project to do, and, you know, it would cost money just to close it. So it's almost like we need to keep it going just to keep it rolling. We're gonna keep going. We're gonna be able to make it through. You know, we're making the payments, some further behind than I would like, but we're making the payments. And we have community support. People want produce, so if we can just get it grown, we can we'll be able to get out of it. I think that one thing that I learned when hiking the Appalachian Trail is that you have different perspectives. I went from ridge to ridge and mountaintop to mountaintop. And as you do that, sometimes you're just walking along the ridge, but sometimes you got to go down and cross those rivers. And so there's ups and downs. And so remembering that there's highs and lows in it all. And you know, it's a journey that you can make it through if you just keep walking.
Sam has a great attitude, but very important. If you or someone you know is in emotional crisis, call or text 988 anytime for confidential free crisis support. Well, next time on Farm Week, On the Farm continues with Season 2, Part 2. We head to Doddsville, Mississippi. There we meet Ed and Bed Pentecost, two brothers who have farmed catfish for 40 years.
But now it's getting harder to keep up with the high cost of running their 600-acre fish farm. As a result, they wonder if they can cope with the stress or should close down the operation altogether.
On the Farm, Season 2 continues next time on Farm Week.
Remember, if you missed a story, look for past episodes of Farm Week on our website at farmweek.tv.
And don't forget to follow us on Facebook and YouTube. See you next week. Happy 4th of July. Thanks for watching.